Welcome back to Conversations with Catholics, Daniel. It's great to have you back. Um, last last week we spoke a little bit over a week ago, I guess. I peppered you with
Yes.
questions the whole time, and so today I think I'm gonna let you kind of just ask me questions, and we'll see where that takes us. How does that sound?
Oh yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Okay, cool. Lay 'em on me.
Yeah. Well, I guess, and I've watched some of your, you know, I've watched some of your presentations, certainly not all of them, but and I've heard, I guess, a couple times where you've sort of given a overview of your background and your childhood and your experience. But um I thought maybe you could just run through that even briefly with me, because sometimes I think, oh well, I'd like to ask a question about this, that, or the other, or uh, so I last time I sort of ran through my life history, so maybe I just thought I could we maybe hear about yours directly, and maybe talk about interesting aspects, because I know we have you know I think we left off last time saying how we come from very opposite ends of the religious spectrum, and yet I think there's a lot of commonality
There
that we
is.
have in our experience. So maybe just kind of go over some of your history, and we could maybe get into just different aspects of that.
Yeah, sure. Um, I'll try to keep it on the briefer side, but then I'll go into like great detail if you want to drill down on one aspect or the other.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because I know you've shared, yes, and I know
Yeah.
you've shared this multiple times, so I don't need the whole. But
Hey, there's aspects of every part of my story that haven't been fully explored on YouTube yet. So we can let's drill down wherever you want, but I'll kind of give you like the Spark Notes overview, and then we'll drill down wherever you see fit. Um, so I was born into a traditionalist Catholic family. My grandparents were Irish immigrants. They came over to this country from Ireland in the late 50s or early 60s, I believe, and
Mhm.
um, uh, they moved here, got married, had my uncle, had my dad, um, and they founded the chapel that I grew up in. Uh, when they founded the chapel, this was shortly after Vatican II, shortly after the creation of the SSPX, and shortly after the offshoot of the FSSP. So this chapel needed to decide for itself whether it wanted to go SSPX or FSSP. They held a vote. It was contentious, and some of that contention exists at that chapel to this day, but it went FSSP. So I grew up in an FSSP traditionalist Catholic chapel. Um, I attended the school that was affiliated with that chapel. School is a strong word for what it was. It was my friend's parents
Mhm.
teaching me in the basement of
Mhm.
the church. My graduating eighth grade class was 4 kids, including myself. So it was me and 3 other kids. So much more similar to homeschooling than to actual schooling. But my parents weren't my teachers. It was my friends' parents. So one of my best
Yes.
friends to this day, his mom was my second grade teacher. Another one of my friends, his mom was one of my teachers. His grandma was one of my teachers. Just various ladies from the chapel would just teach. Very few of them had teaching degrees. And then we also had the priests teach us religion and like Latin. Um, so I stayed at that school through 8th grade. And that school did have an affiliated high school, but that high school was so small that they didn't, when I was in 8th grade, they didn't even have a sophomore high school class. Like they had freshmen, they had juniors, but they had no sophomores because that's how small the high school was. And so my parents had this,
Wow.
yeah, my
And
parents had,
this
go ahead, yeah.
was this in? Did you have you said this was in
It was
Pennsylvania
in New Jersey.
or New
Yeah,
Jersey?
so close. Yeah.
Okay, I
Northern
don't
New
know.
Jersey near New York City. Um,
Yes. Okay.
yeah. Um,
Okay.
And so my parents had this decision to make when it was time they really made the decision for my older brother, and then I just kind of followed suit. But do they send us to this FSSP Catholic affiliated high school, or do they send us to the local public school? And they decided to send us to the local public school. But my parents deliberated about it. But the ultimate decision was that they wanted us to get like a better education than what they figured was available at this teeny tiny the Catholic FSSP school. My dad is an engineer, and so he values education and stuff. So he wanted me to be able to take like higher level maths and stuff like that. When I was in 8th grade at the private school, I was kind of a year behind where the public schoolers were in terms of math because of how the curriculum at this private Catholic school was formulated. So I actually wound up, like, my parents just said to the 8th grade teacher and to the freshman level high school teacher, hey, Kevin's going to take double math in 8th grade. So I took double math in 8th grade. I took pre-algebra and algebra 1 at the same time, which made no sense for me to do it that way. Like, why didn't I just skip pre-algebra? Because pre-algebra wasn't useful to me in the slightest once I was already taking algebra. But regardless, I did double.
You got to check the boxes.
Yes. Yeah. So I did double math in 8th grade so that I could enter the public education system, like caught up with everybody else. And it worked out all right for me educationally in the sense that I took a couple AP level courses. I went to a fine college. I attended the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. So it worked out all right for me. But it probably wouldn't have worked out that way if my parents sent me to the Catholic high school, because it was just not the same. Like, there would have been no opportunity for me to take higher level maths or higher level sciences.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
But going to a public high school was my first kind of trip into the real world. So before public high school, I really spent all of my time with other traditionalist Catholics. I did do like Little League baseball. So I was exposed to other kids, but my dad coached my like Little League softball team. So like I was never far away from a authority figure.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But so for the first time in high school, I was like exposed to non-Catholic like culture and non-Catholic ideas and stuff. I grew up a young earth creationist, and I distinctly remember being 14 in freshman year of high school biology and learning about like the dinosaurs and how they lived millions of years ago. And I actually like raised my hand and like debated my teacher, like telling him like, no, man walked with dinosaurs. Like, the world was only created like 6,000 years ago. I was a young earth creationist, like through and through.
Yeah. So okay. So this is very interesting because really, I'm going to say well into my, oh my gosh, probably my 20s, I was still, I guess, sympathetic to maybe not a radical young earth, a 6,000 year creation, but some type of what would fall under that young earth creationism, not yeah, and not embracing and not I guess not being a huge issue, but really not embracing the full on, accepted scientific understanding of origins,
Yeah.
And I remember there were people that would come to our Methodist church and give us the whole young earth presentation, all the debunking of and I just remember saying to I think it was my, oh geez, was it 8th, 9th, 10th grade biology teacher, probably 8th or 9th grade. And I had, and the idea came to me, this common thing you hear about, well, maybe God created the world
old
with the appearance.
Yes.
It had, and that's just something that came into my brain, and I realized that's like a common thing. But I remember addressing my my biology teacher with that when he was covering evolution. I was like, well, do you think it's possible, that maybe God created, but it just has this appearance of being, the 14 billion years old, or the universe being 14 billion years old. Anyway, so that's fascinating. So you said you were 14 years old.
In like my freshman year of high school, when I was first learning about evolution and like debating my biology teacher.
So
Yeah.
so at this point in your life, you're still 100% on board with the young Earth philosophy.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess I started questioning it then. And it was when I was in like 7th or 8th grade, a non FSSP priest visited our chapel, and not visited. He transferred to our chapel. And he actually said, like, guys, it's okay. Like, it's not a sin to think that the world is older than 6,000 years old. And that was the first time that I had actually like even considered the possibility. Like, but I was still very much so a young Earth creationist because that's how I grew up. My science textbooks at the school, like in 8th grade, my science textbook taught young Earth creationism.
So now, how was that in any way scandalous?
Yo, big time. Yeah, big time.
So I imagine so there was a lot of pushback on what he was bringing into the chapel.
Yes, when this priest was a priest who went through the Novus Ordo. Like he went to a Novus Ordo seminary, became a priest, celebrated the Novus Ordo Mass for a long time. Like attended his first Latin Mass and like fell in love with it and started like he wanted to like celebrate the Latin Mass and like only the Latin Mass. And he kind of just like wound up striking a deal with the FSSP and with the local bishop, where he's pretty much like, can I just like pretend I'm FSSP pretty much and like hang out with the FSSP? And the local bishop was like, yeah, dude, like go ahead. So he did. So he's not FSSP, but he might as well be.
But okay, but he was in love with the liturgy.
Yeah.
He was not on board with all of the fundamentalist
It depends.
Somewhat.
So this one priest, his name was Father Boyd. Father Boyd had a master's degree in some science, chemistry or thermochemistry or something. So he was a science-minded individual. And he was a Catholic priest who loved the traditional liturgy. But he also was fairly, not fairly, I'll say he was very orthodox in terms of like Catholic sexual ethics. So, he would give relatively fire and brimstone sermons about how modern culture is corrosive because the music that's on the radio is, immodest and, that kind of stuff. I'll never forget him quoting Ed Sheeran from the pulpit because this was back.
Oh dear.
Yeah. It was I forget the name of the song. I think it's called like The Shape of You or something by Ed Sheeran. And there's a line that says like, I'm in love with your body. That's what Ed Sheeran says. And so Father Boyd was talking
this was the scandalous.
Well, no, this wasn't scandalous, but the song itself was scandalous. So yes. Father Boyd was saying that this song is terrible and that I'm in love with your body is very much so like a clear indicator of where we're at culturally in the United States today. Because look at us, we are objectifying people and we don't love them for who they are. We love them for their body. And isn't our culture terrible? And that's why we need to be, away. We need to be separate from the culture. We need to be, radically traditional, So
it was Ed Sheeran all along.
Yeah, Ed Sheeran is the but so he was.
I guess Nicki Minaj. I guess you can't big up Nicki Minaj at a Catholic sub.
I think yeah. I think Ed Sheeran was like innocent enough that it was fine to quote, but still bad enough to like serve as an example. But yeah, so he was very orthodox. And very traditionalist in terms of like his temperament. He was just also science-minded. So,
yeah, well, that's sort of a fascinating dynamic because I think, you know, I think there are strands within, the church and even Christianity or religion at large that have those dynamics.
Mhm.
I guess it would be, I don't know if you would call it intersectional, or, there's
Yeah.
just, you have, there's different strands that people have. And, I probably have them, well, I know I have them myself, I'm not all one, certainly not all one thing. There's not just one tribe or one movement that I identify with. I identify with lots of different things.
But that word
Um,
intersectional, you will never hear that word being uttered at the FSSP church that I grew up at, because that word is, that's a leftist word. We don't like that word.
oh dear.
Yeah, yeah. That's the culture of the FSSP chapel that I grew up in.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then, all right. So you're in high school and you're being exposed to sort of some ideas from science, modern science, and you're being exposed to some culture elements that you were maybe sheltered from early in life. And so where did you go from there?
So, throughout high school, I remained pretty darn Catholic until like the very end of high school. Um, Something that I use as like a barometer for how Catholic I was, is the scapular. So I was a brown scapular wearing Catholic ever since I received my first Holy Communion, and I stopped wearing my scapular when I was like 18. So like right at the end of high school. Um, and that's kind of like where the doubts got like big enough that I was like, I don't know if I actually buy this whole scapular thing. Um,
Yeah. So now, was this something you were wearing because you were encouraged
it was just
by the
part of the
church or by
culture,
your
yeah.
parents, or
Hmm.
no, and was it voluntary?
Yeah, it was voluntary. I mean, so it was voluntary, but my mom would yell at me if I like forgot to put, like if I took it off to shower and then I forgot to put it back on after the shower, and my mom like found it in the bathroom or something. She'd come find me, be like, Kevin, put on your scapular, like so. But I wanted to. I'd be like, oh, thank you, mom. You can't. Silly
Right, right,
me.
right, right, right.
So it was
So it was
voluntary.
you saw it as a sort of a devotion
Yeah.
and
And
some.
even more basic than like a devotion, it's just kind of like a cult. Like it's honestly, it's hard to tell people who like didn't grow up this way, but like it's cultural. Like everybody was wearing it. So like of course you're gonna wear it because like everybody wears a scapular. Like it's just what you do.
Yeah. So when I came into the church in 05, 2005, um, you would still hear talk about wearing the scapular. It wasn't a real dominant thing. And I don't know how many people talk about it anymore. I mean, I still hear it mentioned once in a while. But I do remember, and I don't even remember. I guess I remember being at some group that met at the church, some extracurricular group where I guess they were giving out scapulars, because I never bought a scapular,
Yeah, I
but I feel like I was part of some club at the church where they were talking about the value, and I think I tried to wear it. I think I put it on once, and I thought, okay, this just isn't my thing,
yeah.
you know.
Um I'll tell you that in the traditionalist movement, at least at my church, scapular was still really big when I left. Like I like left the church in 2018. And like when I left, it was, as far as I knew, like scapulars were still, like my whole family was still wearing scapulars besides me, really. Um, and my dad still wears the scapular. I was on the phone with my dad yesterday, and like video call, and he was wearing a scapular. Like um, it's still a thing as far as I can tell in trad circles. I agree that
Yeah.
it like the whole idea of like the if you die wearing this you won't go to hell is like a little superstitious and like a little silly maybe, but it's a thing, definitely a
Yeah. And
thing.
I guess I don't poo-poo the whole idea, but I do. my sense is that it's something that it's from another time, is I think generally how I look at it.
And tradies are from another time.
And I don't dismiss the scapular or any any devotions at all, but I just think there are other things that are more current in this day and age. But something I never quite got into, and most priests that I knew were not pushing it, but I was given so I have a scapular kept safely in a drawer.
Do you have a miraculous medal?
No, I don't have a miraculous medal.
Because we all wore miraculous medals too, but most of us just had the miraculous medal sewed inside of our scapular, so that it was just one.
Oh, so there you go. You're doubly
one stone. Yeah,
you're doubly covered.
Yeah.
And I do, and I do have a great reverence for sacramentals. I'm not like, I don't think it's, I don't think, the scapular or any of that, the miraculous medal, I don't look down on it, but it's just whether or not it's your, is it your thing?
Yeah.
So you were wearing the scapular up until your last year
of high school. Yeah, I was like 18 when I stopped wearing it consistently, but I was still very much so Catholic when I was 18. Just the seeds of doubt were growing, but from 14 to 18, I was Catholic enough that I was still wearing the scapular. So I was, pretty darn Catholic.
And okay, so when you say you were Catholic and everything, would you have defined like being Catholic as being a trad Catholic?
When I was no, because I grew up FSSP, I would have always admitted that like Novus Ordo Catholics are still Catholic, but I would have like argued that like the Novus Ordo Catholics are by and large way less orthodox than us trads. Like if you took like a poll of Novus Ordo Catholics, like how many of them believe in the real presence versus how many trads believe in the real presence, like it would be a night and day difference. I would argue that like our liturgy is just more devout, I suppose. So like I'd make all these kinds of arguments for why the trad Catholicism is better, but I don't think I would have ever said that like Novus Ordo Catholics aren't Catholic. I just would have said that they're worse Catholics by and large.
Right. They're sort of second class Catholics.
Yeah.
If
they were serious, they'd become trads. That's kind of how I.
So that was the right way to be a Catholic, was to be trad.
It's better to be trad than to be Novus Ordo, but like Novus Ordo is sufficient. Like you do satisfy your Sunday obligation when you go to a Novus Ordo mass, but it's better to be trad. That was my position at the time. That was my position really up until I was, even after high school, that was still my position.
Yeah. So, and so were you still consistently going to mass?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I was, so when I was in the private Catholic school, I was going to mass 6 days a week because we started mass every day. For school, like the first thing every day was mass. So the only day that I wasn't
just like a Catholic school,
right? So the only day that I wasn't going to mass was Saturday, but Saturday was confessions, so I'd often go to confession. So I was at the chapel that my grandparents founded 7 days a week, not every week, but I was probably at that chapel something like 27 or like 26, 27 days a month. I was at that chapel growing up. In high school, it did become less, but I was very much so still confession on Saturdays, mass every Sunday, mass every holy day of obligation, and just occasionally swinging by the chapel for adoration or just even for 5 minutes just to say a quick prayer, like, because the chapel was right there. Like I lived so close to it. It was, like a 5-minute drive from my house.
Right.
So I was definitely still very Catholic. I was
Right.
considering the
And
priesthood for a little bit there.
wow.
Yeah, I was Catholic. Like my Catholic credentials are like, like I was serious.
And what age do you think you were when you were considering the priesthood?
Young enough that I hadn't started dating my wife, so I was like I was considered. So my confirmation name is Saint John Vianney, the patron saint of priests.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah, right.
yeah, so from the time that I was because I got confirmed when I was in like 5th grade. So from the time that I was like 10 until I was like 15, I probably thought I was going to be a priest. Um, and then I think I just realized like I really like girls like a
Yeah,
lot. So
yeah.
I think I guess that's not for me. I started dating my wife when we were 17. So, so
Okay.
by 17, I was like definitely not on the priest train anymore. But it was before 17 that I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be a priest. But I mean, my confirmation name is John Vianney.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
That's fascinating. So, all right. So and so you were attending mass, but at the family chapel.
yeah. Mm. I,
You never. So there was never a time when you left home and was still attending at another trad or
no, no. So the only Catholic church that I ever attended with regularity was this trad chapel. Um, I didn't move out until 2018 when I was 22 at the time, and I moved out, um, and I told my parents like, hey, I'm moving, and I was moving from New Jersey to Illinois, and I'd been dating my wife, my girlfriend at the time, for 5 years at that point. And so I told my parents like all at the same time. I said I'm not religious. Uh, I'm moving out with my girlfriend. Like she's coming with me to Illinois because I don't think that it's wrong. Uh, and this is all happening, by the way. I'm moving out in 3 months, and I'm moving out with my girlfriend. And so I just told them all this stuff like way too quick with like no warning. So they reacted really poorly, and I wound up marrying my girlfriend at the time with an engagement that only lasted like 3 months, and we got married in like a 10-minute ceremony at the chapel. The only people present for the ceremony were my parents, her parents, my grandparents, and her one sister. So 7 people besides the 2 of us and the priest. It was a 10-minute ceremony. We got in the car immediately after the ceremony and drove 14 hours over to the Chicago area. And that was the last time that I stepped foot in a Catholic church, except for my grandma's funeral. That's the one time I stepped in a Catholic church
yeah.
since then.
And was that back home at the chapel?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was tough. That was tough.
So okay, there was a couple of things that fascinated me there, but so is that the chapel is the only Catholic church you have ever set foot inside?
No, it's the only church that I went to like with regularity. But we would go on vacation to the Catskill Mountains every summer, and
Oh,
so like once a year I would attend a local like Novus Ordo church. But actually a couple years we actually made the drive like an hour away from the vacation, like from the like resort. This was not a glamorous place, but
yeah, the getaway.
we would drive an hour from Greenville, New York to Albany, New York, because they had a traditional mass in Albany, and we
Right.
would do all of that just to avoid going to the Novus Ordo. But so I would attend that Novus Ordo some years. I would attend the traditional mass in Albany other years. And then every now and then I would attend a Novus Ordo church in my town. Like I used to try to bring my wife to Catholic masses, and I thought that it would be like let's just go to the Novus Ordo. Like let me not freak her out. Like,
let's not lay the whole deal on it.
So like we'd go to like the local Novus Ordo a couple times, and like I'd run into my other like Novus Ordo Catholic friends there. They'd be like, Kevin, what are you doing at this church? Like, why aren't you at your Trinity church? I'm like, oh well, like my girlfriend at the time is with me, so we're just here for mass, but that wasn't frequent. It was infrequent. The only church that I went to frequently was the church that my grandparents founded.
Right. So that was you were age 22 when
I moved out,
married and left home.
Yep.
Oh wow. So okay, and then you okay. So you had said there that you laid this whole deal on your folks at one time about I'm not religious. I'm not Catholic. I'm leaving home with my girlfriend. The whole, you just dumped this whole thing on him. Now, when you told your parents at that time, so I'm not Catholic. I'm not religious. I'm neither. Would you? I guess would you see yourself the exact same way today, or when you say I'm not religious at the age of 22 in 2018, versus what you're how you look at yourself today, or how you consider being religious today? Is it the same? Would you have had the same? Would you have laid the same? Would you have laid it on them the same way today as you would have then?
Oh, let me answer this in like a couple different ways. So just, I guess the first like basic question of just like, do you feel the same way to like, are your religious convictions the same today as they were like 5 years ago? The answer is no, they're not the same. I'm pretty sure that I used the word atheist when I was describing myself to my parents back in 2018.
Oh, you're an atheist.
I'm pretty sure that I said that I'm an atheist. I don't call myself an atheist anymore. Right. Now, I will admit that I think it's like a little bit of like a language game, because
100%.
Like I'm not a theist. Like I'm not convinced that a God exists. So if you want to just define an atheist as anybody who's not a theist, then sure, I am an atheist. But I don't have any strong arguments. Like I don't have any arguments that conclude with therefore God cannot exist or it's impossible for God. I don't have anything like that. So I call myself an agnostic. And if you actually read a philosophy textbook, like I fit the definition of agnostic way better than I fit the definition of atheist. So I kind of hate labels. I kind of hate the whole word game, but I tell people that I'm an agnostic, and that seems to convey the right message. So that's what I stick with for the most part. And I think I used the word atheist back then. So that's definitely different.
Because you were 18 or 22, because you were 22.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. 100%. But then there was this other question of like, well, would you do it differently? And like, the answer is yes. Oh my gosh. I would. So I should say that I actually didn't try to tell my parents any of this stuff, but my mom is very, nosy and pushy in like she's
a good mother. She knows what you're up. She knows your business.
And she would just keep on asking me like, because she could tell that I like wasn't devout anymore. So she kept on like pushing, like come on, like tell me what you really believe. Tell me what you really believe. Tell me what you really believe. And no, I'm not going to tell you. And then eventually one day my answer was, Mom, and this was not the right way for me to say this, but I said, Mom, don't ask questions that you don't want answers. Yeah. And that was like oh no, like Kevin is not religious anymore. So then like the cat was out of the bag at that point. So I wouldn't have said that. Like number one, I would not have said, don't ask questions you don't want answers to. As terrible as this sounds, if I could go back in time and redo it, I would have continued lying to them for 3 more months. I would have moved out. I would have not told my parents that like my girlfriend was moving with me. She would have moved out with me. And then I would have been, my parents are not, they're not the kind of, like, they very much so think that, you know, their kids are their responsibility when their kids are in their house. But when their kids are out of their house, it's kind of like it's not their responsibility anymore. So if I had just continued to lie for 3 more months, moved out of my parents' house, and then the next day my girlfriend moved in with me, my parents would have been like, well, he's out of our house. We can't tell him how to live his life anymore. And they would have respected that. And they largely do respect me, like, today. Like, they don't try to convert me. And so that would have been a way better way for me to handle the situation than what I did. But hindsight's 2020. So.
Oh my goodness, yes. If we could all go back and redo all of those, all of those foolish things we did. And
I generally, so I never lie anymore. I used to lie all the time. Like, when I was living in my parents' house, I lied all the time. I lied to myself about what I believed for a long time. I lied to my parents about what I believed until, you know, I said, don't ask questions you want answers to. I don't lie at all anymore. I hate lying. Like, I'm an open book. I will pretty much tell anybody anything that you want to know. I'm not a secretive person in the slightest. So it pains me to say that I wish I lied for 3 more. But I do. I do wish I continued to lie for 3 more months. Because it would have, like, my relationship with my parents today would be much better if I did that.
So it's still, there's still a little bit of a strained.
Yeah. Things are not the same.
Yeah, and you visit them regularly, or
no?
You don't.
No. I saw them a couple months ago for my grandparents' funeral. But other than, you know, I probably see them in person. On average, over the past 5 years, it's probably been twice a year.
But your hours, you're good way away.
Yeah, it's like 700 miles away or something. So, like, it's a, you know, it's,
so you're not just, you got to make a pretty.
It's a whole big thing to go back to New Jersey. So where I'm at in Kentucky, it's like a 10-hour drive without stops. And so my wife and I are good at these long drives now, but, you know, we need to stop, you know, twice for gas at least. So it's still like an 11-hour ordeal from start to finish if we're going to drive, or it's a flight. And, you know, an 11-hour drive or a flight, that's like a, you know, it's not easy. You know, we can't just pop by.
No. Right.
So.
Right. Wow. Okay. So, then I think I had heard you say in some of your talks that the ones that I've heard, that you did continue to briefly identify maybe as just merely Christian, or basic Christian.
Mm-hmm. So, we, in what I've told you just, you know, in the past, like, you know, little bit, I kind of jumped from when I was 18 to when I was 22, like end of high school to like end of college kind of. But in between that, like in college, I actually started attending, are you familiar with CRU, CRU? I forget what it actually stands for, but today they kept the name CRU, but it actually just stands for the Campus Crusade for Christ. It's a and
I'm well familiar with that.
I attended.
We were too old to be, you know, we weren't using CRU back then.
Okay, they call themselves CRU now, and they've called themselves CRU for like a little bit, but the because CRU doesn't stand for Campus Crusade for Christ, but
well, it's Campus CRU, right? Campus CRU is like Campus CRU, right? Campus Crusade.
Oh, is that where that comes from?
Well, that's what I think.
You're probably right.
I just think like it's a hip.
Yes.
You know, kind of a hip, young college kid way. Yeah. We're in Campus CRU. You know?
Yeah. So I went to CRU meetings. Like, I was part of CRU. And this was during my, like, the 4 years of college for me were like a series of rapid. So I entered college calling myself Catholic, like very much so still Catholic.
But now, and this was all before you were 22.
Yes. So between
you were going to college and living at home.
Yes. Yeah. It was
okay.
The college that I attended was without traffic, like a 20-minute drive from my house. Now this is northern New Jersey, so sometimes it would take me an hour to get to campus.
Well,
But
and I did this. I did that same community college gig too. That was what I did. I lived at home and I never completed college because I started working with my grandfather and doing my trade. But um, I did. I attended a few, and I always commuted from home.
yeah,
But I just always I just always assume the majority of people go away to college.
I
So I
did
didn't get.
actually live.
I
I lived on campus for like 3 semesters, but I did it because I applied for a job as an RA so that I could live on campus for free. Um, and so I lived on campus for free for like 3 semesters by working there as an RA. And the reason that I did that was because I wanted to take so many classes that like I just didn't have an extra couple hours to spare every day commuting. So I was like, I'm just gonna get a job as an RA. Yeah, I was kind of crazy in college. I graduated with an engineering degree in 4 years, but I also did 3 separate like co-ops. So I was working like engineering job, internships, right? So not like a job, but like I was working. I did 3 of them, and I still graduated in 4 years. Um, so I
Wow.
was taking night classes. Like I was working during the day and taking night classes and stuff like that. And so I just thought to myself, like, man, like, I get up, I go to work, I come back to campus and I take classes. Like, wouldn't it be so much easier if I could just fall asleep right after my like lecture ended, then wake up and do it again? Because then instead of sacrificing those like 2 hours like of commute, like, to campus and back, like I can just sleep those extra 2 hours and I'm only getting like 5 hours of sleep a night. So isn't 7 like so much better than 5 hours? So that's what I did. I got a job as an RA on campus. And so I did live on campus for like a little bit. But even then, every single weekend I was home. So like, was I really living on campus or was I crashing on campus like, Monday through Thursday night? So,
Yeah, I get that. And this is funny because I always say there's these similarities between you and I. And so you're obviously way more academic than I am.
don't let
Um,
me fool you. I'm really not academic. I just
uh, but and maybe I'm a little bit academically minded, but not in a structured way. Or maybe I never knew what I wanted to do in life. But when I started working, I guess, I was going to college theoretically to study architecture. That was going to be
oh,
my
cool.
thing. And then in the meantime, my grandfather was a lumberyard draftsman.
Oh, wow.
He's like the old lumberyard draftsman where you'd go to the lumberyard and want to build a little house, and they'd have a guy there that would draw your plan up, and just residential work. And then, but houses kind of evolved and got a little more complicated, and he evolved with it. So he was a very good draftsman. And so I'm going to school for architecture. And I said, well, gee, you know, why don't you go work with your grandpa and draw houses while you're going to schools? Because it's kind of related. Well, architecture and drawing houses are very different things, but I fell into that. I fell into that drafting trade, and that's my thing. But I remember when I was in my 20s working at the lumber yard, I would pull these extreme shifts. I'd work 3 days in a row and power nap on my office floor and just go. I mean, I was
Yeah.
committed. It was like the school of hard knocks, and I would drive home and just literally crash, shower, and back,
Same.
and
Yeah.
then and just go hard like that. So that's kind of interesting to hear you're wired a little bit that
Yeah.
that same way. But
And
I could never get committed to a the rigors of academia.
the only reason I was committed to the rigors of academia is because I knew that like a good job waited for me at the end. Um,
Uh-huh.
so like I'm not academic minded in the sense that like I'll take classes just because I love academics. I'm not quite like that. I
Just a
like
liberal arts learner.
right. I'm not like I do like learning about stuff that I'm interested in.
Well, you
Um,
obviously do.
I do like learning about stuff that I'm interested in, but the 100% the driving factor for me was that I wanted to get a good job, and like I did it in a way that like I I didn't pay for my like I got a full ride to the local state school because it was, you know, I'm from New Jersey. I went to the New Jersey Institute of Technology. It's a state school. I did fine in high school, so they gave me a full ride scholarship. I wanted to live on campus, but it costs extra money. So I got a job as an RA, and then I got to live on campus for free. So like everything that I was doing was like from a money point of view. I did engineering because engineers make decent money. Like that's everything that I was. So it's, you know, don't
But
let
your
me
father,
fool you.
but your father's an engineer.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And my father's an engineer, and he works in the pharma space, and now I work in pharma as well. So, you know, despite me and my dad's differences, we're very similar.
That's, you know, and this is very much like me and my dad, you know, growing up, it was like oil and water, but there's these parts of us that are like extremely close. You know, we have these areas that we relate, you know, these areas of commonality. And, you know, and now that I'm in my, you know, or I'm 51 now, but I just think to myself sometimes, my gosh, you've become your father in so many ways.
I am my dad if my dad
Was
like
an agnostic.
yeah, pretty
Non-trad.
much. I really I firmly believe that. Like I'm my dad if my dad was not a traditionalist Catholic.
So in the grand scheme of this, you know, and I listen to you talk, and I, you know, in some ways I think you're wise beyond your years,
Well, thank
because
you, but
so I mean,
don't say
but
that. My
because
head's
so
gonna get
because
big.
this is all this has all happened so quickly, you know, and maybe because I'm, you know, maybe because I'm an old guy now, it feel, you know, I think of all this time, you know, I think of how long my journey has been, and then now you're telling this story, and it's like, oh my gosh, well, you know, I kind of hear the narrative of the story is taking place over decades, and then you give the timeline. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is compressed into
Over a
just,
decade, like one
yeah,
decade. Like 10 years
one.
ago, I was still like Catholic. So I'm 27. So when I
All
was
right,
17, I was Catholic. I was.
all right, all right. So there was this period when you were in college, commuting and or crashing on campus, but still connected to home. Um, you were so I'm getting, and maybe I'm mishearing the story a little bit, but I'm hearing that maybe there was this little time when you were sort of leading this double life.
Yeah,
Like on
yeah.
campus, you were part of crew on
Hmm.
campus,
But then I was attending
but
mass, you know,
but you're
with
still with the trad mat, and so you weren't. So you even your like crew activity, you would have sort of kept that from the
so,
folks in a way.
yes, I never told my parents that I was attending crew meetings. And I likewise never. So, um, I was attending crew meetings. I was watching the Atheist Experience on YouTube, and I was going to Sunday mass. So like I was in like three different worlds at once, and
Oh my.
yeah, and like all I was trying to do was like absorb as much information as I could, pretty much. Um, but I knew that that wouldn't be okay. Like like the trad culture is very much so like you are not to associate. Like don't even watch non-Catholic content. Like even if you go in there with the like explicit intention of like debunking it, like no,
Yeah,
you're even just exposing
it'll
yourself to the
corrupt.
yes, it'll corrupt you. So I couldn't tell my parents that I was attending crew. I couldn't tell my parents that I was watching the Atheist Experience. That would have been a bad decision
And
on my
from
part.
right, and then from your own mindset, did you did in your own mind, did you still, like when you were in crew, did you still like sort of have a like a foot in the trad world where you were saying,
Yes,
well, I can integrate.
I told everybody else at crew that I'm Catholic. And I said, like, I'm hanging out with you guys because, like, you guys have, like, some good ideas. Like, you're wrong about some things because the Catholic Church is right, and so you're wrong about some things.
Right,
But,
yeah.
like, we agree on more than we disagree on, and that's why I'm hanging out with you. And I like you guys, and it's fun to hang out and eat pizza and, you know, just talk about the Bible in the conference room. So,
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
But I told them that I was Catholic. Anybody that I spoke to said, yeah, I'm Catholic, who's attending crew meetings and watching the Atheist Experience. So
this was the like 2016, 17 ish.
And then into 2018, because that's when I graduated from college.
Yeah. Yeah. Which 2016, 17, and I'm, there again, I'm thinking of when I was in college in the early 90s, and what kind of how the world had changed from the 90s to 2016. But now, okay, so now you were watching, and okay, so YouTube is a thing now.
Yeah.
For you,
mm-hmm.
YouTube is a thing, and you're watching the new atheists, just being fascinated by them, or
it started off as so like imagine me at 18 being still like very much so Catholic, like not wearing my scapular anymore because I think that's a little superstitious, but still Catholic, and thinking to myself like I need to know the kinds of people that I'm going to be up against at college. So I better watch this kind of material so that I know their arguments so that I can refute their argument. And so I wasn't just watching the Atheist Experience. I was also watching Catholic Answers, and I was, watching Pints with Aquinas. And I was watching like an equal amount of like Catholic and non-Catholic content with the intention of just being able to better understand and defend my faith. That was when I was like 18. And so I kept doing this. But over the years, over like the 4 years that I kind of went through this transitional period, I found myself actually being moved by the arguments on the other side. And so, even though outwardly I always told everybody I was Catholic, I started to think about myself as more of like a mere Christian, a la C.S. Lewis. And then by the time that I was like 21, I thought about myself as more of like just a theist in general, or maybe even like a deist. And then when I was like 22, that's when the hard atheist word came out. I went through that transition like over the course of 4 years, and it was due like in large part to just me exposing myself to different ideas. And like, I guess it kind of giving myself permission to like really explore like what do I think is true and not true.
Yes. So you felt then in the trad church that you grew up in that there were certain things that you just like ought not to be entertained,
mm-hmm.
or there were some things that we don't even go there. We don't think about this. There's some books that we don't read these books. We don't think these thoughts. We don't read these books. And I guess maybe that there are things we have to commit to, whether we believe them or not.
So there was the element of like mystery, like the Trinity is a mystery, and like you have to commit to God being triune, even though we're never going to be able to fully understand that. But most things were not that way. Most things it was like, hey, these are the list of things that you have to believe in. We have good reasons for believing these things, and if you want to find out the good reasons, all you got to do is consult the Catechism. All you got to do is go ask your parish priest. All you got to do is go on the Vatican website and like look it up. So we have good reasons for them. So if you ever are wondering why we believe what we believe, just go look at the Catechism and the Catechism of Trent too, not the modern liberal catechism, the Catechism of Trent. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So did you have the modern, the CCC in your home, or was that
the CCC? So I had to memorize the CCC in like first grade, like the kiddie version of it, but it's like question 1, who made you? God made me. Question 2, like, why did God make you? God made me to know him, love him, and serve him in this world so that I could be with him in the next world. I still have.
Well, that sounds like okay. So that sounds like sort of Baltimore Catechism.
Yes, thank you. This was the Baltimore Catechism. Was the one that we but once you were old enough to graduate to Trent, like Trent was better because Trent is from the Council of Trent, so it's a church council. But the Baltimore Catechism was yeah.
All right, so you did so there was no Catechism of the Catholic Church, the green book. In your home?
No, but I think the Baltimore Catechism is like still the CCC, right? It's just like it's like a specific version of it or something.
No.
Oh, it's straight up different? See, I didn't even know this.
Right. The Baltimore Catechism is something much older.
Okay. That's what I just
CC.
I thought they were kind of like the same thing more or less until the
Oh no, because the CCC and you'll have to and I don't know I don't know any of the details about exactly how all of this. I only know it in very broad sweeping strokes because when I came into the church in 2005, obviously in the main door, John Paul II, Novus Ordo Catholic Church. We had, a dozen of them around town. I could go to any, it was very, but, so the catechism was a big deal, but, there was a distinction. People would speak oftentimes as like, oh, well, back in the days of the Baltimore Catechism, or there would be sort of very traditionalist or conservative or whatever adjective you want to apply to them, but the Novus Ordo folks that were very traditional in their thinking, they would often pine for the days of the Baltimore Catechism. Especially maybe the older ones would say, oh, well, when I was, when the nuns taught us and it was the Baltimore Catechism, and boy, we knew our faith because it was black and white, because it was the basic question. It was like, this is the question, this is the answer. Mm-hmm. So the new catechism, and, and I do read the catechism, but I have, I confess, I'm such a bad Catholic. I've never systematically, because I know there are groups that systematically go, they meet, whether it be just church groups or men's groups or women's groups or different young people's groups, old people, groups that meet just for the sole purpose of systematically like going through the catechism in a year or whatever. And I've never had an opportunity to be part of one of those groups, just being busy or focused on other things at the time. But I own the catechism, and I look things up. I look things up in the catechism frequently and read it. And there's things in the catechism that and I listen to people talk about I listen to people teach about the catechism. But so I've never gone through it systematically, which I probably should. Something I hope to do many things. There's many things on my list of things that I need to do, but there are also those things that are feeding me right now too, so I'm not just going to say, okay, because yes, you should do this, like eating your broccoli. Like, well, I'll get to that, at some point. Because I'm very familiar, I'm pretty familiar with the catechism, and I can probably even think of, things will come up in my life, and I can even refer. It's like, reading the Bible, but not cover to cover.
Right.
But I don't believe in the catechism. We have that. It's not like it's definitely different than that old Baltimore Catechism.
I definitely memorized the Baltimore Catechism as a kid, like in first and second grade.
How large of a document is it?
It was like a kiddie version. Like it was a version that was appropriate for 6 and 7 year olds.
So this was a kiddie version in the style of the Baltimore Catechism most likely.
I'm going way back in time here, but I want to say that this was like an official Baltimore Catechism that was like for children. Like the Baltimore Catechism group, like whoever, I don't know who puts out the Baltimore Catechism, but like the Archdiocese of Baltimore or whatever, like published an edition of it.
I think that's where it originated.
Yeah.
Someone may have taken it over now.
I don't know, but I think it was like an official Baltimore Catechism for children. But like, yeah, like
now you're going to have to invite someone onto your show who's like a Baltimore Catechism,
like expert
CCC Catechism, authority.
Yeah.
And drill down into this.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll have to do a lot of Googling after we get off because it's fascinating.
I remember, so right when I was leaving the church, so I'm talking 2018, or maybe it was a little bit before that. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith signed that document that changed the Catechism to include something that effectively says the death penalty, it's
not up for negotiation. Yes.
Yeah, it is an insult to the human person, and so should it should not be used anymore. Is essentially what the catechism.
There are no realistic because there was only in the previous version there was only ever a practical exception.
Yes.
Essentially saying, okay, if it's not practical to safely detain a person from doing any harm, then there could be practical, extenuating circumstances where you could exercise it, but morally, it should never be done.
Yeah,
but there was the exception where so they changed it, the language, just to say, you know what, basically the world today, there ain't no time when it's appropriate.
But that caused a big uproar.
What they changed.
That caused a big uproar at my chapel, at least among certain people. Because they viewed it as like sometimes the death penalty is acceptable to no, the death penalty is never acceptable. And so well, which one is it? It's either sometimes acceptable or it's not sometimes acceptable. And they viewed it as the church changing their mind on a matter of morals. And so they were like Sede adjacent people at my FSSP chapel, because don't forget that this was a chapel that almost went SSPX, like when it was founded. So this chapel was FSSP.
But it didn't break off from SSPX.
No, it was founded after the FSSP was already existing, or at least it was founded right around the same time. Because I think that for the first couple of years of its existence, it was like an unincorporated Catholic chapel, and they had to have priests from the surrounding parishes come and say mass there because they didn't have any priests of their own. And then after a few years or something, they got incorporated into the FSSP. But all that to say that there was sedevacantist adjacent people at this church, so you can imagine uproar about.
So in all practical workings of the church, it was basically functioning. You wouldn't know a whole lot of difference walking into an SSPX.
Probably not.
Mass.
No, you probably wouldn't see much.
They held many of the same. It was just this conviction that we can't break away from Rome.
Right. Yeah. And the acronyms after the priests' titles would be different because they would say FSSP instead of SSPX, but besides that one little change in the bulletin, you might not the sermons are probably not very different. We had some pretty fire and brimstone style sermons, we had sermons about how the Pope is when Francis was elected and during the whole the whole Pachamama thing and all that, we had sermons about how it was never sedevacantist from the sermon, but it was sedevacantist adjacent from the sermon. It was the Pope is
Pachamama that old?
I think so. Pachamama happened in 2015 or something, didn't it?
Wow.
Maybe not. Maybe I'm mixing up my Francis scandals. But
I still feel and I know, I don't know. I just still feel like Pachamama was last week.
I know. Because the trads haven't stopped talking about it. But you might be right that Pachamama might actually be something like 2020 or something like that.
But just the other General Francis.
But Francis has every couple months it's something else with Pope Francis. But it's never that big of a deal. But the trads like to blow it out of proportion, you know. Well, at least that's my 2 cents as somebody who's outside of the church.
There are a lot, even the more conservative minded, even like the Catholic Answers crowd, I think, look down their nose sometimes. Well, I mean, you hear them sort of speak. Like I love, well, I don't love it annoys me to no end, but when people give Francis these backhanded compliments, like they're defending, like, oh well, Francis is absolutely the Pope, even if he's a borderline heretic, and
there was a lot of that happening at my chapel. The thing that I remember all the time is like, well, of course Francis is still the Pope. There were popes in the Middle Ages who used to ring the bell in the Vatican when their mistresses were giving birth to their illegitimate children. So if there's like, nobody's going to be worse than those popes in the Middle Ages. So of course Francis is still the Pope, That was like the thing, like that, like they said that like all the time, and they would say that from the pulpit. So it was never sedevacanist, but it was highly critical of Pope.
Right. And I guess technically speaking, that's a valid point of view.
It's Orthodox Catholic. It is Orthodox Catholic. Like it is. You're not sedevacantist for
theoretically.
Pope stinks.
Theoretically, we but I don't. I guess I guess I hear that, and a certain part of me wants to qualify that phenomenon historically. Like, could we have a modern day Pope, having mistresses and illegitimate children and, all these wild and crazy things that some of these terrible popes did? Could that happen? Could that happen today?
I doubt it. I would be shocked.
So I almost want to, take a step back from that, where you're saying, well, obviously Pope Francis can be the Pope because we've had such horrible popes in the past. Well, but are we living in the same world?
The papacy used to be primarily a political station. Like, the sons of wealthy nobles would go off to the priesthood and quickly rise through the ranks, becoming bishops and then archbishops and then cardinals. Like, just because they were the sons of like noblemen and stuff like that. They wanted ties to the Vatican, and the Vatican would be like, oh yeah, like go promote that, like, go promote Father whatever to bishop because he's the son of the Lord of Essex, and we need more money from Essex to fund our war because the papal states used to like wage wars and stuff. So like so there was a ton of people who were bishops and cardinals and even popes who had no business being bishops or cardinals or popes because they weren't actually they didn't choose to be there. They were the second son, so they were not going to inherit anything. So their father just told them, hey, I'm shipping you off to the seminary for you to become a priest because you're my second born. So like, it is a different time. It's definitely a different time.
Right. But, and it was also a time when that was just, that's the way the world was.
Yeah. That's just how it was.
That is how the world was.
Yeah.
And, so so there's a part of that, there's a part of that argument, when people defend Francis as being a legitimate Pope, because he's not as bad. It's like, well, okay, but
our standards should be a little bit higher than that, right? Like,
I would think, yes. Hopefully we've done so, and I do get, that a Pope can lean a little bit one way, to a different end of the spectrum than where you might, everyone's got their idea of where the church should go, and but no, that's sort of humorous.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So then, okay. So you had your foot in these three worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's where we were before we went off on all sorts of tangents. The new atheists, the campus crusade for Christ, sort of merely Christian folks on campus, and then still had some, just felt your home base was maybe in the what do you call it? The FSPX?
FSSP was
FFSP.
FSSP was the chapel that I grew up at. And the SSPX is the other version, and you can refer to them together as the FSSPX. That actually covers both.
Oh.
Yeah, FSSPX covers both organizations, but the FSSP is the chapel that I grew up in. The SSPX is the officially sedevacantist organization.
So you're so close to the SSPX that they're considered under one umbrella almost.
So
it's just one.
Rome doesn't see them under the same umbrella in the sense that the SSPX split from Rome, but then after a couple years of being split, a certain number of the SSPX bishops wanted to return to Rome, but they had like this long list of qualifications for Rome where like, we want to be treated as our own organization with the ability to say the Latin Mass as we see fit, but we want to be in line with Rome. So like, can you please work with us? And the Vatican was like, fine, like we'll take you back. So the FSSP is fully in line with Rome, but also kind of is like its own separate like organization. So like the FSSP priests go to an FSSP seminary, and there's only 2 FSSP seminaries in the world. One of them is in Nebraska, where my cousin is currently studying to become an FSSP priest.
Ooh.
And my brother was there, but my brother discerned out. And then the other one is in Europe. It's in Germany or somewhere. It's somewhere in Europe.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So my family's still real religious.
Yeah. All right. So okay. So at least in college, though, those years you were still, I guess, searching.
Yeah, and for the record, I'm still searching. Like I do not see myself as having arrived anywhere. I'm very much so still on a path somewhere. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm gonna keep on walking. So I don't view myself as having figured anything out yet. Like I have beliefs, but I had beliefs back then too, and my beliefs changed once before. They changed a bunch of times before. My beliefs are almost definitely going to change again. But I'm just open about where I'm at now. Like, hey, this is where I'm at now. I'm currently a nominalist. Mereological nihilism seems true to me. I'm a methodological naturalist. I've got all these. I'm a moral anti-realist. I've got like all these positions where I'm at right now, but I used to not be them, and I might not be them again tomorrow. Like, who knows? So I like to be as open-minded as I can be.
Right, of course. So now, you had in our last conversation, I think we had just started. You had asked me about my sympathies toward panentheism, and then we got into the. Well, I think you brought up Sam Harris.
Yeah.
And how his brand of atheism tends to is almost open to some sort of a vague spirituality, maybe is like how you were saying it.
Yeah, like a naturalistic spirituality is what I'd call it. Because Sam Harris is definitely a naturalist, but he has been booed off of stages at atheist conventions for talking about like meditation and stuff like that. Which I think is wild, because like imagine booing somebody off the stage for saying like, hey, what's good for your mental health? Meditating. And then you get booed off the stage? Like, what? Like, that's wild. But it's happened to Sam Harris. And
that is, although, okay. So, and I remember when you brought that up last time, because this is a very fascinating subject to me, because I am certainly, a person who has this mind that most atheists, self-professing atheists, tend to, when they articulate their belief, I'm always wanting to drill down with them. Like to say, like, okay, but the very thing you're rejecting is you know a very crude caricature of what I would see as, believing in God. My idea of God, certainly like maybe the Dawkins, the flying spaghetti monster type.
Right.
So I guess, all right. So I hear a lot of, and it tends to be the younger, edgier, hipster atheists.
Yes. Yeah.
Not to speak disparagingly,
Yeah.
but and that's that. It's natural to be edgy when you're young, I think. But it's always those younger, hipster, edgy atheists that are going to bring up the flying spaghetti monster or the teacup, the orbiting teacups,
Right.
or
Russell's
all the
teapot or whatever it
things,
is.
or the classic Bertrand Russell kind of atheism.
Yeah.
And so I think, okay, well, what if, I certainly don't think God is a flying spaghetti monster, and I understand, the whole teacup idea. I would agree, so I listen to some of these new atheists and think, okay, it's like, okay, we agree on all the facts. We agree on
Yeah.
all the premises here. It's like, yeah, and then all of a sudden at the end, so therefore, God doesn't exist, or I don't believe God, or I believe there's no existence for God, or I choose to, and I'm like, well, wait, like, how'd you jump into that all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so having said that, you were saying about, Sam getting booed off for getting into meditation, mentioning meditation, and then just getting booed. Well, so I could see how that is going to happen, because a lot of times it seems like the younger edgy guys are going to be the ones that are like, we don't, like, we're getting rid of all of it.
Right.
Like we're it's the throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
We don't want
Exactly.
anything this woo woo, spiritual. We're 100% rational, and the world is. So you get these folks like Harris that, they've got this third path maybe. So the meditation thing is fascinating, and I don't really closely follow Harris or even the new atheists. I mean, you can't avoid them being in
I
the.
don't follow them closely either, so I
Um,
used to, but I really don't anymore.
yeah, but I do hear this is a fascinating thing, because it's something you hear people talk about a lot these days, or at least my antenna always pricks up when I hear someone mention it. And this is this real popularity of TM right now, like all the transcendental meditation. Like, you'll hear so many celebrities talk about it, whether it's like Jerry Seinfeld or I'm drawing a blank on some of the popular names, but it's not uncommon to hear people, or Howard Stern. He's a big TM enthusiast, and some of these guys will talk about it in almost evangelical.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very into their TM, but they're always very, very quick to qualify that this has no religious overtones. That we don't have any kind of theology that comes into this. This is purely a meditation practice. But there is a certain transcendental element to it.
Yeah.
It is called transcendental meditation. So there is this idea of I guess the way to put it would be, there's this plane that we tap into. this certain, maybe a mode of existence, or this plane we tap into. Uh, and I guess I have a lot of sympathy for that, because something that I was talking about in our last discussion was how, a meditative prayer practice has sort of rejuvenated and informed my current faith. So a lot of times I hear guys talking about TM, or maybe another form of just generic meditation. I don't know if that's what Sam does, if he's a TM guy or he has his own type of meditation. But a lot of the sentiments that they speak of when they're talking about their TM, I think, well, that's what I get. A lot of that. I get a lot of that in my prayer experience, and that's a lot of what my prayer life is like. Because it's not, my prayer and meditation life is not like a rote say your prayers. Like say 3 Hail Marys and an Our Father and a Glory Be and all. And then you've prayed. It's much more a meditative experience. And I do pray the Rosary.
But you probably meditate while you say it's like the Rosary is more of like a meditation tool for you than
it's an absolute. But yeah. It's an absolute meditative tool.
And I think that's even what tradies would tell you. But when tradies talk about the Rosary as a tool for meditation, they're not talking about Sam Harris style meditation or or TM. What they're talking about is you should be meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary. So while you're saying the 10 Hail Marys during the third sorrowful mystery, you should be thinking about the crown of thorns and how painful that would have been and how much Jesus suffered for your sins. Like, that's what you should be thinking about. Like, you should be meditating about the crown of thorns during the third. That is the third sorrow. It's been a long time. Yeah. But the third sorrowful mystery is the crowning of thorns, right? I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Yeah, because then there's the carrying of the cross and the death, right?
Yeah.
The carrying of the cross.
The agony in the garden, the scourging at the pillar, the crowning of thorns, the carrying of the cross.
Yeah, you got. Yeah.
So I still got it.
Yeah, like I said, I still say that's my thing. You're so Catholic.
I am. I really am. And if I can toot my own horn real quick, I'm more Catholic than I think your average Catholic. Your average Catholic like doesn't know nearly as much about and maybe average isn't a fair word, but there's plenty of people who only go to Mass on Christmas and Easter. Otherwise, they don't think about being Catholic. And they call themselves Catholic. I think about Catholicism every day, but I don't call myself Catholic. I just think that's kind of funny.
Right. So yeah, I'm probably scandal upon scandal. I'm not a daily rosary. I'm more of a random rosary prayer. Okay. Where my favorite way to pray the rosary. I'm a quality over quantity kind of guy,
How very not traddy of you.
That's very, yeah. I'm not like check all the boxes every day. Like, did you, do this? Did you read this thing? Did you, and go all the way down and you got to do that. But, and there may be times in my life when I drift away even from my, I've had very dry times in my life where I've drifted away from prayer altogether. But it's certainly my meditative prayer is certainly a part of my daily life. And when I have time, meditative readings. But my favorite way to pray the rosary is the walking rosary. And I just pray it on my 10 fingers because if God, didn't want me to say it on my fingers, he wanted to give me 10 fingers to say it on, And so, on beautiful summer, maybe spring or fall evenings, there's nothing I love but to take a little half-hour stroll around the neighborhood, and I'll just say it. I'll just do I'll either just do a decade, or I will do my own version of an abbreviated rosary where I'll like, instead of doing decades of, the tens, I'll do like reps of 3. So just, but I deeply I do it very slowly, you know, and there's always this uh, controversy about, well, how fast should you say because you go to these rosary groups and they're, hey, 5 minutes, we're done. There we go. We got a rosary in, which I don't even look down upon that. Now, when I first came into the church, coming from my Protestant background, or my more, I was never really I guess somewhat Protestant,
Vain
fundamentalist,
repetition.
whatever I was. I remember coming into the church, I still had a lot of that mindset. And I thought, oh, this is so scandalous, saying the rosary so quickly, until you join a rosary group and say it like every day for a month. And then you're like, well, you guys are just saying it fast because that's just how you just worked up to that pitch. People that say it fast don't know they're saying it fast.
Right.
But anyway, I still gravitate towards, I'm more of, in my own practice, very, more slowly and meditatively. But that's my favorite way to pray the rosary. But and I do meditate on the mysteries, but my meditations get very cosmic. It's not a real literal sort of, I start with the crown of thorns maybe, but then it just goes in a very cosmic place
When I meditate,
very quickly.
I meditate like cosmically. Like one of my favorite things to think about is how all of the atoms in my body, besides the hydrogen atoms, were formed in the bellies of dying stars. Like, whoa, what? Like that's incredible. But
Yes,
that's true. Our best science today points
that's
us.
just a fact, and it's a factual. So okay, so now I don't know if you watched the interview that Bishop Barron did with Jordan Peterson.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I don't.
And there was that one. There
Go
was that
ahead.
one spot. I think there was just one time they had a formal. They might have chatted, but there was that one formal that I know of.
Yeah, I definitely saw it. I don't remember much of it. But what were you going to say about it in
No,
particular?
no. So it was that one point, and I don't know if you picked up on it or not, when Peterson kind of was pushing Barron a little bit to say, he said, so the Catholic Church has no problem with evolution. And, Bear's like, oh, no. We're all on board with evolution. And then
Kinda.
Peterson said, do you remember this part where Peterson says, why don't they flesh it out? Why don't they incorporate it? Why don't they explore that? And Barron he just kind of like ducked away from that.
Mm.
Which I was and I guess it's in real time, and he might not have been ready to really talk about it, but I was thinking, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, you know
Let's
why? Because the official position of the church is that there was some kind of special creation for Adam and Eve. So, at some point, there was the first two human beings from whom we are all descended, which flies in the face of modern science. So
well, yes, but however, I know for a fact there are Catholic scholars that
except
have a very
yeah,
nuanced take of what that.
for
Okay,
sure.
so yes, we
I've
yes,
done a lot of
we would do officially say that we have like an official formulation
yes.
of how we make sense of it. But there's this there's this book that I became aware of that um, Father Casey was talking about. I don't know if you ever follow any of Father Casey's stuff, that
No, I don't
young
think so.
Franciscan priest.
Oh, breaking the
You know,
habit?
Breaking the Habit. Yeah.
Oh, I just forgot that his name was Father Casey. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. Breaking the Habit, Father Casey. He did an episode where he talked about this book, and the essence of this book is sort of it's talking about the hierarchy of beliefs, how we go from dogmas to definitive doctrines down, there's this hierarchy, the structure of, the highest beliefs, things you must believe, and then down to just basically, sort of it gets down to like the pastoral level at the end.
That's him.
There you go.
That's him. That's the Breaking the Habit guy. I just wanted to make sure that I was right. And
yeah, so, shout out to Father Casey.
Yeah, cool. I am subscribed to Breaking the Habit, and I watch his, and I actually really like a lot of his lectures, because a lot of them are like pretty like not, I'm going to say not Catholic, but I don't mean that they're not like un-Catholic. I just mean that they're like naturalist friendly almost. Like he'll put out like a little video, and it's like a 5-minute sermon about forgiveness. And like it's entirely compatible with, like, it's not like you should forgive people because you don't want to go to hell. It's like no, you should forgive people because like everybody's well-being is, I've literally heard him talk about human well-being.
Right, there's a practical, naturalistic, yes. Like there's an explanation. It's not just this isn't just a blind faith thing. Right.
Yeah.
Because the church teaches it. It says it in the Baltimore Catechism.
Yeah, I like Father Casey. Yeah.
And there are, and I think Father Casey would be very much of a, and I'm not good naming the Vatican II documents either.
Me neither. Fides et Ratio, maybe.
It's which one?
Fides et Ratio. That's the
faith that's actually a John Paul II document.
Oh, is that a JP2
we
document?
We thought it was maybe Ratzinger. I know last time we brought up.
Okay.
I brought up Fides et Ratio. We thought it was Ratzinger,
but it's JP2.
Like, is it? It was a JP2, right?
Okay.
But anyway, the one about the church, just how the church relates to the world religions.
Oh, was that Lumen Gentium?
And how? I don't know if it's Lumen Gentium though. I think there's another one.
Okay.
Some of them seem to overlap.
Yes.
Anyway, Anyway, and I read Lumen Gentium when I came into the church. So I did, and De Verbum, of course, because that's the easiest one. But that is I do need to. I mean, that is on my, one of my urgent hot burner items is I really need to get into the Vatican II documents, because I think there's such a wealth there. But anyway, there was one of the, it's just one of the documents that talks about how there is light in some of the world religions. It's just, we would say, well, it's not the completeness of revelation, but there is some revelation. And I think that's a thing that we're even maybe talking about even more so currently. It's a greater current trend. And certainly Francis is on board with that.
Yeah. And I'll be honest and tell you that I still hold out hope that I can be Catholic. Like I'll say Catholic like this again, but I hope I can be Catholic again one day. Now, I can't be Catholic while being Catholic commit somebody to certain philosophical suppositions that I just don't hold. So, for instance, right now I can't be Catholic in the sense that right now I'm a nominalist, and nominalism and Catholicism just don't seem to mix to me. But how
would and from what standpoint would you?
So
maybe what would be your example of?
Yeah.
Where's the barrier in that respect?
The big thing for me is that the nominalist is the one who rejects the existence of universals or abstracta, and among those abstracta would be substances. So transubstantiation is. Catholics and naturalists and nominalists would all agree that the accidents are not changing. The Catholic would then say, yes, but the substance of the host is changing. And then the nominalist says, well, substances don't exist. So the thing is
Okay.
just the particular. So
All
transubstantiation
right.
can't really exist under a nominalistic worldview. So
So, okay. All right. So can I maybe speak to that?
yeah,
Um, my own view of that.
yeah, go ahead.
So I I look at the way I see transubstantiation is that it is an explanation in Aristotelian terms. It's like, okay, if you're going to look at the world like that, this is the way we would explain how it happens. So I guess, and so fascinating thing. The Orthodox would not accept transubstantiation.
Well, the Orthodox have that essence energy distinction thing going on, but Orthodox Christianity is still incompatible with nominalism for the same reason, but just the language would be
But I mean,
different.
as far as the way the Orthodox would view the Eucharist, the transformation of the elements, so the Orthodox would say, and I'm not an expert on Orthodox, but
Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
I know the gist of what they would say just from hearing Orthodox Catholic, conversations. But the Orthodox idea is that at the consecration, the elements become the body and blood of Christ. But we don't really, we leave it in the realm of mystery as to actually how it happens. Okay. So it's still left in there. It's more in the realm of mystery to the Orthodox than it would be, they, and I sort of maintain that even many modern Catholics, modern day Catholics, would be more sympathetic to that approach than a sort of like
Probably.
so like I heard Barron, my hero. I heard Barron doing a talk the other day, probably one of his older things about and the video was about the Eucharist. And I was waiting for him to mention transubstantiation. And actually, I don't know if he ever used the word unless he used it ever so briefly in passing at the very end. And he did he did briefly, just very briefly, say, well, substance accident, substance changes, but it's still the accidents. And I don't think he even used the word transubstantiation. But so, um, you know, my take on that is that transubstantiation is a very scholastic way of speaking, and I would still, I would not dispute it, but I would say that it is a way of explaining it within that particular view of the world. Okay, so if that's the way you see the world working, that's the way. It's like that's the way we're going to explain it starting from those premises. But I don't, and I guess we would have to get a priest on here to tell us. Would you have to literally confess like a hard, transubstantiation to be a faithful Catholic? If you were willing to go as far as saying, okay, it does become the true body and blood of Christ in some way. And maybe you're not willing to say that, but let's just hypothetically, if a Catholic was to say, okay, it's truly the body, it's truly the body and blood of Christ at consecration, but I don't understand exactly. I just take it,
So I've done a pretty it's relatively substantial deep dive on transubstantiation. So I pulled up the Catechism of the Catholic Church just to get like the official Catholic reading on what transubstantiation here is, and they couch it in Aristotelian terms. So I'll read it. This is CCC 283 line 1413. Transubstantiation means the change of the whole substance of bread into the substance of the body of Christ, and the whole substance of wine into the substance of his blood. This change is brought about in the Eucharistic prayer through the efficacy of the word of Christ and by the action of the Holy Spirit. However, the outward characteristics of the bread and wine, that is, the Eucharistic species, remains unaltered. So they do couch it in this hylomorphic language of substances, and everything that I seem to read seems to point to like a Catholic who wishes to remain Orthodox does have to understand that transubstantiation does mean that the substance, whatever the substance means, of the bread used to be the substance of bread. But after the consecration, that bread doesn't have bread substance anymore. Now it has body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ substance.
Yes, but we don't mean it in a way that it was a physical.
Well, of course not. That's
right.
Right.
But
the nominalist is the one who rejects that any kind of those abstracta don't exist. So, that's why I say that nominalism can't coexist with Catholicism, because transubstantiation doesn't mean anything. Under a nominalistic worldview.
So
I actually have a video about nominalism coming out tomorrow.
Oh, how perfect!
Funny timing.
How perfect!
And that video is going to air before this video airs too. So
yeah, okay.
Likely.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, and I guess I don't. I'm a little handicapped, just not understanding the nuances of nominalism.
No, and the response for the Catholic is kind of easy. It's just like, well, that's fine. I'm just not a nominalist, and you're in good company. Most philosophers are not nominalists. Most philosophers are some.
So what is some? So maybe give me an example of something in the real world that you would look at differently as a nominalist.
So, do you think that love really exists? Like it has real existence.
As a force, or like the arrow of Cupid or something?
Do you think that love,
like, do you think we could put it in a bottle, and if you were like, let's say I'm deficient in love, that we could get it in a bottle and inject it into me?
So the Platonist would be more of a realist about it, and the Aristotelian would be a moderate realist about it. But they would both couch love in some kind of realist term. They would both refer to love as being an abstracta. The realist would say that there is just this Platonic abstracta love. The Aristotelian would say, well, like love exists in each instantiation of love, but there's no, like, Plato's cave doesn't exist where love hangs out. But the nominalist,
it's not an ideal form in the heavens.
Right. Plato would say, yes, there's an ideal form of love in the heavens. Aristotle would say, no, there's no ideal form of love that exists in the heavens. However, love still exists. Love is just instantiated in like each one of us when we love each other. And then the nominalist would just say, no, so love exists. The realist, whether you're Platonic or Aristotelian, would say, yes, that is true. Love exists. The nominalist would say, it is strictly speaking false that love exists. What the nominalist would agree to is that neurons in brains fire in a certain way. They release certain chemicals in your body, which make you feel attracted to somebody. They make you want to do nice things for that person. If it's a certain kind of love, they might make you want to marry that person, be intimate with that person. All of that stuff is like nominalist friendly. But love exists is strictly speaking false to the nominalist.
Okay. So I think where my mind, okay, so where my mind goes when I hear that, my mind goes to like a chicken and egg problem. So you're essentially saying, love is the phenomena of all, it's the phenomena that results from all of these physical actions that are happening physically in our body.
Precisely. That's what I
So,
think.
so you would say first came the body, then came the phenomena.
Yeah, like before the first mind, like before the first brain existed, love didn't exist before.
Okay. So where my and this is very my thinking is probably more metaphysical than yours, but so my where my mind goes when I hear that, and I haven't worked this out, and I'm just
Oh,
talking
me
off the
neither. I'm very much so
I'm
still working things out. So,
I'm just talking out of my head. It always gets me into trouble. But no, where my mind goes is that it that if we start from this premise, okay, let's just start from this naturalistic premise, okay, just playing a game, starting from, we'll say, okay, what if we start here, okay, um, and we go back and say, well, okay, so we have this phenomenon we call love, okay, we just observe it. We say, oh, that two people loving each other, there's love. There's love in that family, love in this community, love in the world. And now what really is it? We'll say, well, we drill down, we look for it under a magnifying glass, we look in the heavens, we don't see any love. What is it? Well, it's just the result of this phenomenon. So all these neurons firing and pheromones and chemicals and hormones in our body doing their things, and then reward punishment mechanisms, and all of the things we can say that create the phenomena. Okay, so then my mind sort of wants to go back one layer further. I want to go a step back and say, maybe so, yet all of these things evolved this way. Okay, so then I would maybe put love as, certainly not an object or a substance or a thing, but I would maybe put it as something behind, all of that, just the very ground for how things evolved in the way they evolved. So I guess I don't imagine that there would be other worlds, or there's always this philosophical question: what if hate, what if we lived in a world where that evolved where hate was the virtue? Those kinds of philosophical games we can play. And I just have this notion. It's not a scientific idea. It's just the way my mind thinks. I would place love even further back. And maybe you would say, well, then now you're just being teleological. But maybe I would accept it. Maybe I'd say, yeah, maybe you could say there is some teleology going on there. But that's where I would put. My thinking tends to go. And then that gets into, that sort of gets into, where some of the ways I think when I say I'm sympathetic to panentheistic ideas. It's kind of where my mind goes. I keep going back, 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 and that's where I locate God. So, and then we just say, well, God is love, right?
Yeah.
So that's where my thinking goes with it. But I don't know. I just my own casual ideas about the Eucharist are, I would be perfectly fine being Orthodox without having the doctrine of transubstantiation. Okay, that's where I would personally be. Um, uh, you know, that's just where that's where I would personally be. I mean, I understand the point of transubstantiation and the development of it, and why we still sort of use those terms. Although I think even that catechism definition you read was probably softened from a real hardcore transubstantiation presentation.
The one I'm most familiar with is from the Council of Trent, and what I read to you was from the CCC, not from the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent,
well, and
is
right, and
more,
I think it was very softened from what you would hear in the Council of Trent.
Right.
Do you know? not to start plugging books or anything, but do you know? Do you know this book?
Why I'm Still Christian? No.
Why I Am Still a Christian by Hans Küng, which most Catholics would say, well, he isn't a Christian. but he had a friendly meeting with Benedict before Hans passed. And I'm not a big advocate of Küng's thoughts in any way, but I am very much sympathetic to much of what goes on in the more progressive end of the Catholic world. Küng said something in his book, which certainly doesn't represent the church at large, but he was making a point. And this is in the context of ecumenicism and an ultimate reunion. So Küng is very much a German. Okay, so I should say he passed recently, but he mentions in the context of just in the context of the different branches of Christianity having different ideas about the Eucharist, and the Eucharist being a huge divider in the Christian world. Even among Protestant Christians, there's huge disagreement about what actually happens to the body and blood. But he has this one. This is just literally a bullet point that he pops up off here, and so Küng says, he says the third point of controversy in whether the Eucharistic gifts are transformed, whether there is quote unquote transubstantiation. So he goes on to say this: no informed Catholic would ever hold the view today that Jesus Christ's presence in the Eucharist can only be explained in one way. That is, with the help of the theory of transubstantiation that was developed in the Middle Ages and the Counter-Reformation. At the same time, no informed Protestant would simply dismiss the doctrine of transubstantiation with incredulity. So that's like Küng's view.
Küng hasn't met Tradies. Because Tradies
he probably has. So Küng was one of the guys. Küng was one of the guys at the Vatican II. Okay, Küng and Ratzinger were like tight.
Okay.
At Vatican II, and at Vatican II, Ratzinger was sort of looked at as the wild young, progressive, and then after Vatican II, the Küng, Skillebeeks, trying to think who the other ones that they sort of went off in a more radical direction where Ratzinger and Hans Urs von Balthasar and Congar, they sort of, went in that more traditional role. But Kung never left. Kung was only forbidden to teach as a Catholic. He could not teach as a Catholic teacher. Officially, he could not teach in an official Catholic capacity. He remained on at Tübingen, and he continued to be a priest. I mean, he died a Catholic and he died a priest. But he was always on, very much on the extreme progressive end of things. But that's the way he looks at transubstantiation. So I guess my position on it is, I look at Catholicism as having a very broad parameters of where you can be on so many issues. And the one thing that the book I was telling you about, that Father Casey had on one of his episodes that I got, I'll have to look it up for you. But it was just about the hierarchy of beliefs. And in that book, when he's talking about dogmas, he makes the point that we don't really have a number of, like, we say we have dogmas, but we don't number. It's not like we have, the 70 dogmas or something. We speak of having dogmas, but really all dogma is an outgrowth of a single dogma, which is the person of Christ. So in the view of this author, there is essentially only one, when you really get down to it, there's really only one central dogma, and then there is like a flowering of secondary dogmas which flower out of the person of Christ. So you could say, okay, well, there's the Trinity, or there's the 12 points of the Apostles' Creed, and then you get but then you get out of the realm of dogmas, and you get into like definitive doctrines. I think it's the way he calls it. And then it goes on and on down. It keeps getting less and less important, down to just sort of the basic pastoral type thing. So there's this question he addresses in the book of, what do you have to believe? As like, what does a Catholic have to believe? Because you're going to get a different answer about what does a Catholic have to believe, whether you're talking to, say, on one hand, the trad community you grew up with, or the Catholic Answers, which are very
Orthodox.
Yes, in their own understanding of what it means to be Orthodox. I think I'm Orthodox. I think I'm quite Orthodox. I think I'm 100% Orthodox.
Yeah.
But all the way to the current,
So I do agree with you that what it means to be Catholic, like what are the minimum requirements to be a Catholic, changes from person to person. But I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, I kind of just detest the whole question. Like it makes me sad that people actually care so deeply about what must I believe, instead of just deciding for yourself what you believe after you look at the facts. I definitely get that. But so no, and the only reason I guess I brought that up is because you had said that, I don't know how you said it, that you would, I guess you said you don't rule out maybe being Catholic in some way, shape, or form in the future, or right.
Or maybe you would like to be Catholic.
Yeah. I would even go as far as to say that I would like it, but one of us would have to change a whole lot. Like either me or the church would have to change a whole lot.
Okay, so I guess right. So I guess the only thing I said is, so as soon as you said, well, I want to be Catholic, but then you went into all of this esoteric philosophy as your reason why I can't be Catholic, and I'm like, and so in my mind, I'm saying, well, I think you could you could be I think you could be a nominalist and have your own. I just think it would require to work out a nominalist understanding of the Eucharist, is how I would see that. And I think I think
It would
that's,
it would be a lot more than just transubstantiation, because under a
well, and
nominalist,
right, right, and I get that.
and to be honest, I think that I'm just um I'm just honest with like what I believe and what I don't believe. And I could just insist that I'm Catholic and have this kind of Catholic, like when I say that I'm Catholic, I don't mean what anybody else understands to be Catholic. And I could, when I say Catholic, I actually mean, well, no, I'm a nominalist, I'm a materialist, I'm a mereological nihilist, and I'm a moral anti-realist. But words are only as useful as what other people agree that they mean. And people seem to agree that Catholic does not mean nominalist. In fact, it means moderate realist by and large. Catholic does not mean moral anti-realist. Catholic means moral realist. And so it just seems kind of dishonest. Like, yes, I could couch, when I say that I'm Catholic, I really could mean, yes, I'm a Catholic with all these different, but instead I'm just honest, and I'm using the words as other people use them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I get that, but I also think when we would say, that to be a Catholic would mean to be a realist. I think the philosophical bar is maybe a little lower, and certainly there are many Catholic philosophers, okay, many brilliant Catholic philosophers, but in a general way, when it's just like, generally, what does it mean to be Catholic? And to say, well, it would mean to be realist. Well, I think when you get deeply into a philosophical system, that there's a whole different level of concerns that come to the table. And there are many different ways to reconcile, what it would mean to be a nominalist versus what it would mean to be a realist. I think maybe at face value, what it is to be a nominalist, you'd say, well, that's not compatible with Catholicism. But I suspect that you could explore your nominalism and possibly come up with your own system of understanding.
I sure could, but then that would be like Kevin's Catholicism instead of Catholic Catholicism, if that makes sense. The nice thing about Catholicism that it's pretty well defined. Like, we have all of these infallible councils and stuff like that. And if you're going to reject the teachings of these infallible councils, as I would have to do if I was going to be both Catholic and nominalist, then it's kind of just like I've created a new Protestant sect. I've created this thing that it's high church Kevism.
Well, I don't know, but we do have right. But we do have different, So okay, here's a, and this is maybe a completely different subject altogether. But take something like the filioque. Okay, so for that was the big
Orthodox,
split, East and West, was over the filioque, the Holy Spirit proceeding not only from the Father but filioque, and from the Son. And it's still a bone of contention with some of the hardcore Orthodox,
the Ortho Bros.
The Ortho Bros.
That's what they call themselves.
Yeah.
There's like a group of hardcore internet Orthodox people who like call themselves the Ortho Bros.
Oh, that's what I would call them. But they literally self-identify as the
Yes,
Ortho
unironically,
Bros.
They call themselves. It's like the Rad Trads and the Ortho Bros. Like,
okay. My New Year's resolution is to be charitable to everyone, so I'm just gonna accept that. Yeah. But that's not the way I'm wired. Okay, let's just say I'm not wired like the whole bro culture is.
I'm not either.
but but so yeah, but the real strict hardcore Orthodox are that's still a big bone of contention. But in recent years, the Catholic bishops and some of the Orthodox representatives got together, and they hammered out and understand. They said, you know what, we can hammer this out to where what you mean by proceeding from the Father and what we mean by proceeding from the Father and the Son, we can work this out. And they did, and they put out a document. And then even there's the some of the Eastern rites that came back into
The
communion.
Melkites and yeah.
Yes, the Byzantines and
Mm.
all of this. My understanding is that they still say the creed without, the not say, I guess, the non-filioque creed. They still say in some of those they still say it. They say the Orthodox version of the creed. They say, proceed. The Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, and they go right on with it. But the the Catholic the Catholic bishops have gotten together with the Orthodox people, and they've just worked through it, and just through a process of clarification. It's like this dialogue. Well, what do you really mean by this? Or how far can you push that? And they've come to a place where they say, well, now we see what you mean, and here's what we mean, and we're all good with it. And it's effectively no barrier to unity unless one of the parties makes it a barrier to unity. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say the same, in a similar way. I could see a person working out a, because you're still because it's still Catholic theology that you're reconciling with, say, your nominalism, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say, well, no, it's my Kevin Catholicism, but I don't know if it would be, because you're just essentially taking. It would still be Catholicism.
Would it? If I said that under transubstantiation nothing changes, is that
Well, nothing physically changes.
right? And if I'm a nominalist, and if I'm a naturalist, if I'm a mereological nihilist, then that means that nothing changes.
Well, okay, but now so let's put a pin in that. We'll just put a pin in that for 1 second. So we that would I would say then you're also, though, you're not bringing God into this equation at this level. Then you would be looking at transubstantiation as merely what the ability that the priest has. Like, the priest is purely 100% acting just out of his own capacity, and there is no room for God doing anything.
No, so that wasn't quite what I was saying. What I was saying was more like I was more of just asking what transubstantiation is. I wasn't asking so much what the cause of transubstantiation. Like, hey, is it the priest doing it or is it God doing it? I wasn't even there yet. I'm still at what is transubstantiation? Like, what is even happening during transubstantiation? According to the nominalist, the answer, a Catholic nominalist would say that nothing changes under transubstantiation, because the Catholic says the only thing that changes are the abstracta, and then the nominalist says abstracta don't exist. So all of the stuff that doesn't change is the only stuff that exists. The stuff that does change is the stuff that doesn't exist. So that's just another way of saying that nothing changes.
Okay, so now here's a question, though. Do you think, and not to be primitivist, but so I don't think Jesus would know what we're talking about at all.
Well, me neither, but I also
Right?
don't think that Jesus was like literally a god. So
Okay, okay. Well, that's okay. But we'll just say the man Jesus.
yeah, the historical Jesus would have no idea what
Yeah,
transubstantiation.
we both would agree that there's a historical Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I, you know, you know, like you know, obviously, you know, I think we agree really quite a bit
We do.
on historical criticism. You know, the nature of the Gospels, the nature of the transmission of the, you know, all of those things. I think, you know, and I was a part probably because we did our thing. It was like the next day a Bart Ehrman thing pops up in my screen. I'm like,
There
oh,
you
please,
go.
not Bart Ehrman. And I listened him give it. It was an old Bart Ehrman, like when a fiery Bart Ehrman
Like a
before he
15
sort of
years ago
became.
Bart Ehrman.
Yeah, and he was given a thing, you know, and he had to raise his voice because there was no. I realized there was no microphone in the room. There, it must have been real early. They wasn't even talking to where you needed a microphone,
Right.
and he was like raising his voice. I think, well, there's no microphone. He's just talking loud, but he was like really like. But then I'm listening to all the things he's saying, and I'm thinking, I could hear like Joseph Ratzinger giving this same lecture, but in a more pastoral voice, professor, you know, in Joseph Ratzinger's professorial, you know, calm voice. I could hear him saying all of this to his, you know, in his lecture, all these facts, you know, all these facts. But oh, that was it. That was a tangent. So I was, but yes. So the historical Jesus, we would say the historical Jesus. If the historical Jesus eavesdropped, you know, we were transported back in time to a little, you know, alley in Galilee or
Nazareth.
something,
Yeah.
Nazareth, Galilee, wherever we were, and then this historical Jesus eavesdrops on us. He would probably be like, "What are you, you know? These are just two crackpots talking about esoteric things." Um, so and I don't and I'm not trying to I'm not diminishing transubstantiation. You know, I don't want to say I'm diminishing transubstantiation because I'm not, but I do see it as a very scholastic uh, and you know response to the Reformation kind of doctrine, and I see it as one way. I see it as one way to explain very much the thing I read out of Kung. Um, it's very much one way to explain it, and but I would also say it's sort of a way to explain it within that framework, you know, within that frame of reference, you know, from a very Aristotelian sort of scholastic, Thomistic view of the world. That's the way, that's the language they used, okay, and that's the way you'd explain it. So I think there are other ways to explain it, um, and maybe that's something we want to maybe we wanted to dedicate a whole talk to sometime.
I agree because we've been going for over 2 hours. So if we start a new topic now, I think we'd be here all night.
No, we are. But you know, I will say quickly that my part of my part of my journey into the Catholic Church that I didn't discuss at all last time, and it was a very big part of, and it was just a big part of my life journey, but it turned out to be very compatible when I was exploring Catholicism, was my whole journey through um, my whole evolution and understanding of what the Eucharist is, which is rooted in what the Passover is. Because you know, when I was in that Seventh Day Church, you know, not only did we not keep Sunday and we kept the Seventh Day Saturday Sabbath, but we also did not celebrate any of the mainstream Christian holidays. So we didn't do Christmas, we didn't do Easter. We kept the holy days of the Old Testament. So I was keeping Passover, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Tabernacles, Pentecost, like with the Jews, like on the calendar, when it's like the Jewish Pentecost, keeping, that Pentecost, all of the 7 holy days of, and there was just this huge odyssey that I took in exactly how it is that we should keep the Passover, which led me personally to an idea that was very much like the Catholic understanding of the Eucharist. And it was right at that time when, when those two worlds collided. And it wasn't my primary reason. It was still the things I was talking about last time, the Trinity and the canon of Scripture. But the undercurrent there was, the Eucharist was like, I was like, obviously, that's where I'm headed with this. And they just like put a bow in it. But that would be a fascinating discussion in the future.
Let's do it. I'm not going anywhere. So, there's no limit to the amount of topics that we can cover. Maybe there's a limit in the amount of topics that we can cover in a single day, just because there's only 24 hours in any given day. But we can we can take as many sessions as we want.
Yeah, obviously. Right.
Cool.
For sure. Well, okay. Well, yeah, I guess we'll keep in touch.
Cool. Sounds good. Daniel, thank you so much for being on the show. This was awesome again, and we'll schedule something soon.
I love it.